what's the squad like? What's the regulations? What's the rules for who you can play? And how's that affected the squad? Bearing in mind you'd probably like to be putting some younger players out on loan, perhaps the Championship or League One the season ahead.
Yeah, well, I think, in terms of the kind of rules, you're allowed to play one under 21 players and under 20 team, albeit we'll be very young. And the goalkeeper can be over age. And I believe that if you have an assistant coach that, and this is maybe in time, that can, as you think of the old days in terms of that experienced player coming in and playing with young players, then there's the possibility of that particular player playing as well. But for us, a really super young team. We've got a lot of players now, and it's been great. A lot of players that are up with the first team, so they will stay with the first team, and we'll then bring in other younger players. So
Owen Moffat probably won't be playing the Colts side. He's consigned to the first team for the season ahead. Well,
we don't know who, for example, who's it going to be. I mean, Owen has done really well. That's been a real plus. So there's every chance that Owen will be with the first team tomorrow. I don't know what their squad is, but you can see even there's been a lot of press. Even Callum McGregor gave Owen a lot of positivity in what he's done up here and training on his own at times. So he's that's one that's really exciting for us as well. So that's a really positive story. That, and there's more than just one. There's Dane Murray, Adam Montgomery, Ben Wiley, Leo Helder, Barry Coffey, Tim Belly. So all these players have been with the first team, and they've equipped themselves very well, I believe.
Are they allowed movement between the first team and the Colts?
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
What do you feel will be the benefits in terms of player development for these guys playing specifically in this league?
I think there's going to be a learning curve. I really do. And I think it'll be a great experience for them. I know for a number of years we've been going on about a Colt team or a B team getting into the kind of lower league. I remember as far back as 2008 when I was doing my pro licence. I went over to France and I witnessed how they do it in France, and then obviously there's examples of Spain. So I think for a number of years we've been looking for change, and I think the fact that it's now happened. I think when I was a younger player, I used to get the experience of playing with experienced players in the reserves. That's no longer the case now. I think we need to try and create that pathway and that gap between under 18 football and first team football. So in effect, it means that if it's young players, if we can then control where they play, we can then control their development. And there's no doubt as the season progresses, playing against senior pros, playing in areas and pitches they've probably never been in, fans, the whole thing, I think it can only be a really positive experience for them. And I've no doubt that's going to bring the players on.
Are you disappointed it's only for one season? Would you like to see it for more than one season? Obviously, the news broke this week as well that there will be no Celtic B team playing in the SPFL 2 next season.
Yeah, listen, we're just looking at the season ahead and we're focusing on the Lowland League. I think it's small steps. We are gradually getting there in small steps. And I've no doubt that there'll be a lot of people who'll be looking in to see how it goes and how it progresses. And it can only be a benefit. It can only be a benefit. There is absolutely no doubt our young players getting the challenge. Sometimes they're a wee bit mollycoddled at times. Sometimes it's a nice environment. They're in here. They're now out there in the big world. They're now going to take a couple of knocks. There's no doubt of that. But we are trying to recreate that kind of pathway, which is probably the most difficult thing, but not just in Scotland, but in Europe, in any football terminology between the youth and first team. And I think if we can create something that's going to be beneficial to our young players and furthermore beneficial to our first team, which is the most important thing, then brilliant.
Just finally from me, Tommy, how much will you be in liaising with the first team manager in terms of your style of football and his style of football? If players then make the grade up, they can slots right in.
Yeah, well, as I say, fortunately now we've got 8 young players who are eligible for the game tomorrow for us, who will be with the first team, and they've had the benefit of when the managers come in of, training with the manager and getting his methodology and his style of play. I've watched the first team train a couple of times as well. I think it looks really exciting. The players have settled in really well. So in terms of that transition, I think it is important. We've got a good communication link between the staff and the B team and the first team. And I think that's so important. And I think that transition, not just in terms of the football side, but sports science side and the physical development of the players, I think that's really key, because ultimately you want your player to step up and not be phased by getting in with the first team. You know, and if we can kind of control that side of it, so that when they do go up, you know, they're not alienated by it. They're really focused on. They know exactly where they fit in. They know exactly what the demands are of training with the first team, and they know exactly in terms of position specific what they should be doing.
Previously, in terms of the other countries, the way the B teams work, Tommy, they sign for the B team, and then they'll play with the B team, and then they might progress to, if you look at the Urian, like the guy that's come into the Scotland under-21s, he was playing with his B team, but now he's going to sign a new contract with the senior team. They can't switch between the two, so they couldn't play for the B team one week and then play for the senior team the next week. But you just to clarify, you're saying it's different, that the players can.
Yeah, I know that. I think there's a certain number of games, I think, that you can play. This is what happened when I went and seen the teams in France. There's only so many games that you play, and then you then automatically become that first team player, and it's right. So we'll have players that will probably be, as I say, young players that are eligible, like Dane Murray just now, Adam Montgomery. Yeah. We hope that we don't get them back. That's the main thing. We hope we don't get them back. Right. But because ultimately that's where you want them to be. You want to be up there, and you want them to stay up there. But players also need games as well. You know, they need games as well. So that's the understanding for us.
But it's not a hived-off squad. That's all. I was just want to clarify what Joe's point earlier. It's not a hived-off squad. This is your B team. You know, they can be B team players who play with A team, if you like.
No, we've as I say, we've got a really young side. We're now looking at, based on the number of players that have been up with the first team now, we're now looking at bringing in players from under 17s, under 18s. What a challenge that is for them. What a challenge it is for us. So, I mean, ultimately, as I say, the main thing is to get them into the first team, and that's our sole goal.
Just looking at the Lowland League as a whole, the growth of the league since its inception, it's come on leaps and bounds. As you said, you mentioned the quality of teams there that you're going to be up against this season. What are your thoughts on the Lowland League as a whole? It's obviously an ultra-competitive one, and well, you look at the amount of teams that were gunning for the title last season, it's going to be really open.
I totally agree with you. I think it is come on leaps and bounds. I think since the introduction of the pyramid structure, you see the amount of investment that's gone into the Lowland League, even sponsorship, television, the whole thing, commercial, certainly moving in the right direction. There's no doubt about that. I think also you see how, as I say, I use Celtic Hearts as an example, how they're now in the League Two. So there is a pathway for them as well, these other teams, and that in itself is fresh, it's open, and you can see how it has grown over the years. But it's grown in the right direction, so it's a fantastic setup just now.
I think on the disconnect between the youth squad and the first team over the last few years, we've seen a lot of players move out to Bayern Munich and stuff like that. How are we looking to stop these players? I know once they've got the eye of Bayern Munich and stuff, it's hard to keep them at Celtic. But how do we do that as a club?
I think regarding the kind of the pathway, you know, you've mentioned players who have gone that. Unfortunately, there's nothing you can do about that. That'll always be the case. But I think if you clearly see the successes that we've had in terms of bringing young players through into the first team, the McGregors, the Forrests, the Tierneys, the Mikey Johnsons and all that, the Robertsons and that are through, the Montgomerys who have played, Dembele, you know. So I think it's important that they see a clear pathway. Now, who's to say that the players that go on, the younger players, probably could have been in our first team, or they couldn't have. You know, it's a kind of there's different paths to get there, different ways to get to a first team. But I do think the fact that we have now tried to bridge the gap with, and we've been crying out for it, because before we would just put players out on loan, no guarantee they would play, which is fine. Okay, I understand that, but you were kind of less. in terms of control of the situation. Now you're more in control of the situation. Albeit as a young team, so I'd imagine that those players that go out on loan will be players that will be over age for the B team, but still need to go out on loan and play some games. So but for us, I think to bridge that gap again is so important. I think this is a way in which we'll do that. And as you can say, we've also got young players who are up there training with the first team, so they're not that far from the first team, and it's important they see that as well. And hence the reason why we both teams train at Lennoxtown.
Just a one on the kind of goals for the season, Tommy. Are you looking to do, like, what is the outcome here? Are you looking to try and win every game, or is the player development the most important part of this?
Absolutely, player development is the most important thing. Listen, we won't win every game. We know that. There will be games where we'll be particularly strong, i.e. there'll be maybe players that have been with the first team that maybe come down for a game, and I mean the young players. Mm-hmm. Your Moffats of that, I hope they don't come down. I hope they stay up, because then we'll have been doing something right if they stay up. So as I say, for example, tomorrow we will be super young tomorrow. It will be an experience. It will be a learning experience. So for us, the target is always, as I say, trying to clear that, have that vehicle for developing them. But first and foremost, we'd like to win every game. We know that. Celtic need to win every game. That's not a dirty word to win things, that's for sure. But the most important thing for us is definitely player development. And then for that, if they see then young players going up, then the batch underneath them see that pathway, and then you get that excited 17-year-old, 16-year-old coming up. So for me, it's to clear the pathway, first and foremost, player development. Absolutely. We don't get any prizes for winning the kind of reserve league or anything like that. The big prize for me is getting them into the first team and making them valuable.
Just to follow up on that, Tommy, obviously reserve football's not been around for the last couple of seasons. Do you see this as a long-term thing for the younger teams to go being introduced to this level and see it as a better way to develop them rather than having the reserve league? Yeah,
listen, we understand that, and I think that's something that there's a lot of people need to gather around and say, how do we best serve our young players below the first team? So it's not just in isolation in that. There's a lot of discussion on how we do that. This is obviously just one of those discussions that hopefully will bear fruit in terms of the progression. So I think there's a lot of different ways of getting there, and I think it's important that we kind of stick to that.
We sent out quite a lot of players on loan last season, and probably a full team worth. Is that going to be reduced dramatically now?
I would think so. I think under the circumstances last year, where there was no games for anyone really apart from the first team, so you've got to get games. These kids have got to play games. Young players have got to play games. That's why you train. That's why we've got the staff that we've got to prepare them for the games. So that's why it makes it an even more exciting prospect. The fact that we've now got not just a games programme, but the number of games is incredible. So that in itself is what they want. They want to play games. We'll be playing 2 games a week for a number of weeks, and then we'll also play in the cup. I think we get Annan Athletic in the cup again, and then after that there'll also be the Glasgow Cup. So to have a really strong games programme is important. Something that hasn't been there in the last couple of years through a number of things. One being obviously the pandemic. But now that the focus is now in getting it back on, getting players on the pitch and giving them that opportunity to go and play and develop.
Firstly, do you feel the Lowland League as opposed to a reserve league or loan deals have a more significant benefit in the development of the younger players?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we know reserve league, and I think we need change. We need something that's going to excite everybody, and I think even by the kind of magnitude of this, it's started to excite people, and there's been a fresh focus on it. So I think that'll definitely develop players. There's no doubt. We're going to put young players in where they're going to be a little bit uncomfortable because they're not used to that, the rigours of maybe in front of a crowd or hostile situations and stuff like that. So we're putting them in to challenge them, to challenge them against men, as you so speak. And there's no doubt that these young players, at times, it'll not be always easy. It'll be a bumpy ride, but we understand that, and we just need to understand that it'll take time to adjust, and they will take time to adjust. Certainly when we've played, in games against opposition before, whether it's been Lowland leagues or that, you just don't get enough of it. You know, you put them in there, and then we'll go and play a Chelsea or whatever, and it's a different game altogether, you know. So I think the fact that there's a wee bit of longevity with this and these fixtures, I think it'll greatly help the young players. And the staff. I think it's good for staff as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. Will there be any players who featured in the pre-season tour in Wales be part of the squad, and will we get a chance to see any of them in action against Bonnyrigg Rose on Saturday?
Well, there is, as I say, there's 8 players that have been with the first team. I don't think they'll be involved tomorrow with me. I'm hopeful they're not, in fact. And that itself leaves other space for other young players to come in. So let's wish them luck. And it's great. Sometimes you just pitch them in. Some players surprise you, some disappoint you, but you know, that's the uncertainty of it, and that's the little bit I like about it.
And lastly, if you had a chance to chat to Angie pre-season, and if so, what have those discussions consisted of pre-season in terms of style or the usage of the younger players in the first team?
Oh, I've not that much of a debate. I've watched my training. I had a meeting with the manager, myself, Chris McCart, Darren O'Day, who was with us as well, because Darren's now in with the B team, and Ollie Morgan, who's sports scientist. So we got a meeting with the manager. He just explained to us his style of play, his methodology. He was very open, great in terms of really excited what he spoke about, but also the fact that to see him on the pitch is probably the kind of proof. You know, you can talk, but to actually see everything unfold on the pitch was exciting for us as well. And it is important we try to mirror to see what the first team are doing, and there's no doubt that message is starting to come through.
Just wondering, in terms of kind of squads outside the Celtic first team, the Celtic women's team found a real connection with supporters over the last 12 months or so specifically. Obviously, with a very busy schedule ahead and kind of more access for supporters to watch the B team, is that the kind of thing you're hoping for too, to sort of make household names from some of these young guys?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. The women's team have done really well. You know, they'll be in the Champions League and they'll be able to play this year. And we have been involved and we will play our games at Airdrie, and the women's team will play their games as well there. So we've had to kind of dovetail a little bit in terms of fixtures, but there's not really any real clash. I think what we're trying to do is make sure nothing collides with one another. I think we want to open these games out to as many people as we can, so they can see the women's game, they can see the B squad, they'll see the first team game as well. So you know, I think it's exciting times, and as I say, you did mention the women's team, and rightly so. They've done really well.
One of the things that I've been looking at is obviously you're talking about the fixture programme. It's going to be great for the young players being able to fulfil a season. Also, there's a chance if the first team do make the UEFA Champions League, that the team get entered into the youth league as well. Is the squad going to be of a good enough size for yourselves to possibly complete that full programme? What would it have to be, young players possibly coming up further from the academy to help out in those fixtures?
Yeah, that may well be the case, yeah. I think, yeah, well, I mean, the Champions League's under 19-1, and you're right if the first team, and we hope the first team make the group stages, then we automatically get into that. So, but then when you think about it, in these number of games and all the number of games that you mentioned too, what a great kind of preparation that is for going into this kind of Champions League. It's fresh as well, so it's all systems go for me.
Just going back to the Lowland League, the style of football there, you mentioned there that the younger players might get some knocks, but I think a lot of teams like to get the ball down on the deck, play good football, maybe better than what people might expect. Do you think that'll suit the team rather than just like, you know, teams lumping long balls and hard challenges? Do you think that'll suit the team ahead of the season?
Yeah, I think it'll. I think the whole construction of it in terms of teams, and you're right. Sometimes I think people don't understand how much quality is in the Lowland League, and I think you'll witness that. You know, when you go and play, we're going to go and play against a team tomorrow who have got experienced players who have played Premier League games and things like that. So let's not be unkind to these teams, because these teams are going to be really well organised. I've seen it firsthand, So we really need to be organised. We need to come up with a way of how we're going to cope with, one, the physicality, but also the fact that these teams can play. So we're expecting tough games, and I don't mean every game I think will be tough.
It's obviously a new era at Celtic with the new management, the new CEO, and of course this new setup. For you and your coaches, how big a test is this for you, and how excited is yourself to take part in this sort of journey?
Yeah, listen, I've got a great staff behind me. Dan O'Day's come up from the under-18s, and Dan has just slotted in. Even the excitement of Darren, and having Darren's presence is exciting. Because ultimately it's not just about players, it's about staff as well, and the staff development. So they're aware of the challenge, and going by the pre-season and our preparation pre-season, it's been tough, but it's been something that we've all relished. So yeah, it's going to be something that, as I say, we look forward to. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be a roller coaster, but as I say, we're going to give the young players the chance to express themselves, and that's ultimately what we want to do.